Well, hello there, Tuberubers and Tuberettes alike. It's a short talk in the trailer park with an old guy, and that would be you know who. It's a Sunday afternoon. I went to church this morning, and I decided make a video about some of that stuff a little bit. I don't want to wear you out, but the thing that strikes me is so odd that from a motivational angle, okay, it'd be like. You have. I remember there was a guy named Jimmy Johnson years ago. I'm kind of just, freestyling as I go here, but he was the coach of the Dallas Cowboys. The thing I remember about the guy was his hair. It was always like perfect. But anyway, I guess he was a real, precision kind of guy. Expected a lot of his people, and the team really stepped up and improved. And so there's a lot of times where people they acknowledge that it's the coach who really does make the difference. And so that's why some of these coaches can command these monster salaries, because they generate a winning record, which means money for either the school or the city or the owners, whoever. But anyway, the thing that I was thinking about is that I went down to church today. Now, UPC is a Presbyterian church here in Las Cruces. There's three of them of this ilk, PCA, in town, and the service that we had today was a pretty typical example. And if you have any interest at all, it should be listed on Facebook if you want to dip in and look at it. But I wouldn't bother if I were you. But anyway, it's listed as University Presbyterian on Wisconsin Avenue in Las Cruces, New Mexico. But anyway, if you don't look at it, that's okay. The thing that struck me today again, and I've been kind of harping on this, like old guys tend to do, like, what, we're on that page again? Get over it, move on. But in other words, it's sort of like you have things, the Great Commission. A lot of you might call them more low church, say charismatic-y, maybe the Baptists and folks. You go into a Baptist service / charismatic, and really there's some singing, there's some prayer. There's probably some announcements of some ilk. There's a sermon, and that's it. Okay, adios, pack it up, go. And so, at any rate, this thing here is way more stilted in terms of being old school liturgical type stuff. I just want to give you a couple of samples here. You got a call to worship, which means we're going to summon the Almighty as a group. Hey, come and be with us. So it's a kind of a prayer, and then there's a voiceover thing. Then there's hymns that come in, very orthodox and heavy duty, doctrinal stuff. Then there's a confession of sin. Then there's a silent confession. There's a corporate prayer. There's words of assurance. There's we did tithes and offerings. Yeah, well, you can expect that. But anyway, there was a doxology. We confessed the Apostles' Creed, and all kinds of good stuff. But the thing is that when you're around a kind of a more of an evangelistic type outreach group than, say, the PCA, you'll end up with these comments to the effect, the very tail end of Matthew, "Go ye therefore to the ends of the earth, making disciples of all men, teaching them all that I've said to you, etc." And so it's just sort of like, go do that. Go evangelize. Okay. But yet there's a couple of little issues here. If you think back to my illustration of Jimmy Johnson, some teams just do better under certain leadership. Okay, that's all there is to it. And so there's an element where it's kind of like, okay, here's an example. I'll give you an example. We were sitting in Sunday school today and talking ostensibly about, anxiety, depression, loneliness in the general population, possible links between that and, exposure to screen time, social media, all the junk there. And so we have a generation, or generations, I guess, who are almost supremely alienated, like little individual units who hardly have anything to do with anyone else, and all their little world is tied up here. Well, the thing is that this alienation and this loneliness is itself not a wholesome thing. It has a lot of really bad health effects especially on older folks. Like Alzheimer's showing up, heart attacks showing up, all sorts of strange manifestations showing out of the basic word lonely. Well, so the answer is go and be nicer to lonely people. Yeah, solved it. You know what I mean? And the thing that strikes me as so odd Now here was the contribution I tried to make, and let me just tell you, it was received like a turd at a punch bowl. I mean, it was just like, I don't see that. Move on. But anyway, I was talking about, and I've mentioned this before, that a lot of the early explosion of the growth of the church in the Roman Empire, the first century or centuries, I think it was a dual phasic witness. In other words, yes, we're going to testify to the reality that Jesus is risen from the dead indeed, and currently is and shall always be now Lord of all. Okay, he's like God in the flesh. All right, but the thing is that, so that's the data, but the kind of the want to feature, the how do you address the motivational angle so that people actually want to go and tell other people good news. Well, what is the good news? And at least part of it is, and I tried to say this, as clearly as I could, that the Lord is, there's a supernatural aspect of Christianity, which paganism or any man-made system, and all this AI guck and all that, none of it can compare. In that, rooted at the base of the Christian testimony is a supernaturalism. In other words, it wasn't that I woke up one day and decided, due to my good taste in friends, to become a Christian, and decided this would be good for my career, and so I moved in. No, I was essentially taken captive, a little bit like Paul, except his case is a lot more traumatic. But in other words, Paul didn't come in voluntarily. He was essentially arrested, and that's essentially a lot of my testimony. But the main difference is that the Paul afterwards had Christ dwelling in him, and among the believers, so to speak, over the believers, and this new living ability, capacity, desire in the heart was what they were excited about. In other words, that was supplied the want to. I want to tell you the good news. Well, what's the good news? It's all about Jesus. He has changed me. I tell you what, he's intervening in people's lives all around the world, and he's not letting up until they are fully, are fully conformed to the image of righteous humility, loyalty. All of the keen and beautiful aspects of the righteousness of Christ are being built into his people little by little, and he's using all the the chaos and stupidity of our era to part of that is to achieve that in us, for us to forsake our own wisdom, to put down our own keen insights, and to accept the answer that there has been a provision made for us that we could not have and would not have ever thought of, much less been able to make it go. Now that supernatural dynamic of God dwelling in us, the paganism has nothing to offer. Paganism essentially says, if you pay your dues and essentially pay off the gods, and if you straighten up and fly right, things might work out for you. In other words, the idea is that if you do good stuff, then you might get good stuff back, and the result would be, if you could do gooder and gooder and gooder, you see, well then after a while you'd have it made. Well, that's interesting, but nobody's geared up that way. And so how do you, when I say to you, go and preach the good news about Jesus, fine. It's a true statement, but how do I make you want to do that? Well, I don't make you do anything. But what I do is, instead, is I'm the one who has to be excited about the resurrection power, how he's moving in. He's moving into our lives. He's moving into our world. This new domain is reordering things according to truth and humility and his goodness and a lot of other good stuff. But in other words, the Word is in us, and the Word is a hymn. And so, among other things, that's partially what causes a little bit of confusion. So yeah, I was just thinking about all that kind of stuff today, and I thought, the Presbyterian model is really a nice model in terms of the liturgical content. There's a lot of really solid biblical stuff there, but neither in the PCA model nor in the charismatic/Baptisty model have I found anything anywhere where someone is attempting to inject into the discussion, oh, by the way, our basic this, when someone says, Mike, go evangelize, I basically just kind of say, well, you got the wrong gringo. Although I may not verbally oppose them, but certainly we're going to have some, what do you call it, that passive hostility there, passive hostile or whatever it's called. And in other words, I'm just not going to do it. Fundamentally, the reasons are I don't want to, and the other reason is I don't know what I'm doing. And so the situation is that you need to tell the good news that you know. The good news that I know is that when I was lost and crazy as hell, the Lord had mercy on me, and I was going to off myself. I was going to take myself out, and He stalled me on that. And He stalled me really well, and in fact, He's still stalling. I learned over the next, 30 years after I became a Christianity, how to beat suicide. I've learned how to whip suicide's ass with help, from the good Lord. So one of the changes He's made in me is that my basic desire, all those years ago, if you'd asked me and pinned me up against a wall or a locker in junior high, what's your basic desire? What do you want out of life? And I think it kind of distilled down to, at one point or another, and it seemed like an easy answer. I tell you what I want out of life. I want out of life. In other words, I just hated it down here. All the stupidity, all the crime, all the corruption, all the futility, all the waste and mismanagement, and just grotesque behavior on parts of humans by and large, and myself included. I mean, it's not like I'm some Goldilocks who's of unsoiled ilk or something like that. It's not like that. The point is that unless you deal with the want to aspect, you really don't have much to work with. And so there's an element when Jesus comes to town, people sit up and notice. He was, and it still is. He's the kind of guy that people rally around. He's our leader, and we do better with him at the head, because the only other option is for me to be at the head of me and you to be at the head of you. And so what you get when you got that is you got wars. And so I just wanted to kind of pass that on to you today, that there is good news. And the good news is that you have something to say. Your contribution may not move the world, but it's going to move somebody. It's going to move a heart somewhere. And you just need to speak up. And essentially, what happened to you. Just tell people what happened to you. I was walking along, minding my own business, hating God, hating people, and hating myself. And He came to meddle. And He hasn't let up since. And I have to admire Him in terms of His patience, His doggedness. I don't know how many times I advised Him, why don't you just move on, Find some more promising character down the road. Oh, today's unpaid sponsor, these cheapskates, refused to send me any royalties. So I'm going to go ahead and drink their beer anyway. It's a Sunday afternoon, and I'm watering the grass outdoors a little bit. And I might take a little bit of a walk, but I was awfully lazy yesterday. I really got beat up at the end of the week in terms of just being tired and wore down. And so I talked to the doc on, here we go with old guy stuff. I talked to the doc on Friday. I said, hey, look, you cut me up in the middle of my back and over here, blah, 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 blah. Why is it my right hip is hurting me so badly? Those big muscles right around the hip socket. And he goes like this. He had no idea, or he didn't want to admit. And I kept thinking to myself in the conversation, now, wait a minute. I can't be the only person on the planet, we would hope, who's gone through a laminectomy, and then there's this weird nerve thing that fires up afterwards, a nerve muscular thing. So anyway, I do know that if I rest and take it easy on that rascal, it's not nearly as bad. So I went for maybe a 1 mile walk yesterday and said, I'm done. But I asked him, can you reach forward in your official doctor guessing the future hat and tell me, just give me an estimate. Is this going to be doing this for 6 months? Is this going to be doing this for 10 months? Should I just kind of get used to this for the rest of my life? And so tomorrow I'm going to go down and talk to another orthopedic guy about this weirdo bum shoulder over here, and he wants to do some weird procedure which I don't understand at all what the point of that would be. But he claims that it's the alternative to a total shoulder replacement. I think there's one more alternative I'd like to investigate with him is what if we just do nothing? You know what I mean? I can still move it around. It's weak and it's painful and stuff. But what if I just did nothing with it? I'll be 67 soon. You know, what have I got? Another 10 years? Who knows? I don't know. But in other words, I think there's an expectation for us that as we age, that I should still have the flexibility and strength I did when I was 23. And maybe for some people they can achieve that or stuff like that. But I think for the vast screaming majority of human beings, by the time you're hitting close to 70, your body's kind of, getting tired out and wanting to break down and fall to pieces. All my life, I've basically denied that about myself. I denied my own frailty and my own weakness, and I'm having to face up to it now. And it's kind of a shock, but not a real surprise. But the situation here in southern New Mexico, it's a good situation. We're still praying for more rain. Please pray for rain for the southwest of the United States. And as we consider, another week coming up, in other words, have you ever been around someone who just is just excited and kind of a vital, glad, involved person in whatever they're doing, but especially if it was something like a life enhancing. And so really most of these people that are really, they end up being motivational speakers selling stuff and having to do with multi-level marketing, saying that you could become your own little mogul, you know what I mean? And I don't want to go there, but in other words, people are still drawn to leaders who can inspire. Jesus Christ is inspiration himself, and when he comes to dwell in your body and in your life and in your family and in your household and in your church, changes happen. Honesty and a kindness begins to erupt that is from outside. We're not sourcing this, we're experiencing it. So we're looking outside of us for salvation, and we look inside to realize that, yes, he did hear. I am not the man I was. Now, I'm not the man I shall be, but he's making progress as he sees fit. And that's true for all of us, isn't it? So buck up, you're on the right page, and tomorrow's another day, and all of the chaos and stupidity can wait. Let all that trouble just go deal with itself. And you sit down, water the grass, have a beer, and consider how blessed you are to understand in your heart that the great desire that we all have to somehow measure up, somehow be good enough, somehow reach a plateau of acceptability or something, all of that just goes right down the toilet because the whole thing is flawed from the root, and he supplies a new life, a new record, a new mind, a new heart, a new pattern, a new desire. He's about life, and he's about goodness, and he ain't giving up on you till you're more like him. And he ain't gonna quit. This guy, once he starts, he don't quit until he's done. God bless you, and God bless him. And so, in other words, relax. You're on the right side.